CNN, ABC, and Inc. magazine, a bunch of others. And she's had the honor of a Nobel Peace Prize nomination for the work that she's doing on global forgiveness. She's also a nonprofit leadership foundation, a founder in that. I could go on, but we're just so excited to have Dr. Shawne on Thriving Launch.
All righty. I am so excited to be here with Dr. Shawne. It is so awesome to be here. This is a big, really important and big subject for me to talk about forgiveness. As many of you may or may not know, I've written a variety of articles, and I'm actually in the process of writing another one for Success Magazine on forgiveness. Dr. Shawne, welcome to the show. Are you ready to launch?
I'm launched, baby. I'm here. I'm already there with you.
Absolutely love it. So, one of the first things that's just top of mind for me is, why did you choose forgiveness as one of the subjects as your main subject? Why is that such an important subject matter?
It's so funny, and you probably get this too, and the folks that listen to you, you don't really pick your subject picks you. And isn't it something when you look at the things that we teach are usually the things that we need the most? And a lot of folks know my story. I'm pretty open about it. I'm an incest survivor, and I'm at the point now as a grandmother, and it's an odd thing to say, that I can even say that being molested as a child was the thing that launched me to thrive. And not that I would wish anything as horrific as being molested on anyone. And at the same time, we get our journeys, and it's about who we become in the process of those journeys. And dang, Luis, I have become an amazing human because of the things that happened for me rather than to me. And forgiveness is a big part.
Someone else that talks about this is Colin Tipping, and he has a quote that you totally reminded me of there. And he says, things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And and I, like you, share something similar. And I know everyone listening, we've all had our own traumas. We've all had our own challenges. And, you might listen to Dr. Shawne's story. You might listen to my story, Kamala's story. And all of us fit in different places, or sometimes we contrast other people's stories. Like, my story is one that most people listen to and they're just like, oh my God, I can't imagine what it was like to go through that. And I didn't go through something like that. But, I know that everyone has something that has been hard for them, difficult and challenging. And those challenges, those difficulties, those traumas, those upsets, one of the things I hear from you, Dr. Shawne, is that you transmuted it. Somehow you've gone through this process where you've taken pain and actually turned it into your life's mission. You've turned it into something that is allowing you to gift the other world with something really beautiful. Rumi has a quote that I really love, is, imagine what beautiful flowers God makes with manure. And it sounds like you've made flowers. How do you go through that process to turn this ickiness, incest, that sounds terrible, sounds incredibly difficult to go through? How do you turn that into something that's beautiful?
Yeah. And, even as you said it, transmute or transform, it really is a process. And the questions that we get all the time on our website or in social media or on Facebook is how do I forgive? And the answer, especially for something traumatic, is, to me, traumatic would include getting breast cancer, or losing your job or your home, or having a child murdered. We all have our own definition of what's traumatic. And the process is going to be the same every single time, which is oxymoron. It's a process, it's different, and it's the same, and it's different. And everybody goes through a process, and all our processes are iterative processes, meaning they're nonlinear. And in research, there is a lineage of what people go through when they forgive. It starts with anger and shock, grief, and then getting to a place of acceptance, and then finally peace. But it's not a straight line. It's an iterative process. So let's say you lose your job, and that can be very traumatic for a lot of folks, or you lose a large client, and then you're in shock and you're so angry. And then you get another opportunity the next day, and you say to yourself, oh, cool, one window closes and another window opens. And then you don't get that one. And then you go back to the shock again. So it's this process of ebb and flow and allowing the different feelings in these different phases to move you forward and move you backward. And it's that pendulum swinging that allows you to shift and change. Because really what happens is your perceptions start to change and the intensity of the emotion starts to subside and you actually change as a person. And that is the process of forgiveness. When I hear things like forgive and forget, I want to say that is just crap. This is not about forgiving and forgetting. It's not about taking the high road. It's not about any of that. It's about being a human and having this very beautiful human experience of forgiving.
I really appreciate the way that you're framing this, because so much about forgiveness can be kind of a bypassing that I see the way that it's framed, that we have these terrible things that happen in our lives, and we could just move on from them and forgive and just let them go and be a bigger person. But that's not always the case. And I think there's this real value in being able to experience our own pain, our own grief around what the experience has brought us, rather than jumping to the state of forgiveness, first and foremost. And I think that what you're saying here is that forgiveness is this journey. It's not just about skipping all the other steps of feeling your own feelings, but it's the journey that you go to arrive there. Is that right?
You are spot on, Camilla. That's exactly what it is. And here's the thing. If you jump to, I'm taking the high road, whatever's incomplete will show up in different ways, whether it's in sabotage, whether it's sideways. Maybe you'll smoke cigarettes or you'll eat 10 Reese's peanut butter cups. Keep shoveling down what's incomplete, because we as human beings want to transform and complete conversations. And I already know this about you guys, just from how you feel and who you're being, that nothing gets resolved and it keeps repeating itself until you face it. And I come from the school of thought, I might as well face it and move through it and transform it and love it up and be with it. That's the courageous route. And that's where all the miracles show up.
So beautiful. One thing that forgiveness is something that I've struggled with myself. I've struggled with, it's not like one of the gifts, it's not one of my superpowers to like jump to forgiveness or to be able to let go of things that have happened. And one thing that I'm curious about is, for me, sorry, it's a little vulnerable to talk about, but for me, I feel like what I learned from experiences that I had from people is that, okay, now I understand who that person is now. So it was about me misperceiving them as someone that they weren't. And that's why, I feel like trust was broken in an experience like that. But I'm really curious, like, what would you say to someone like me who forgiveness isn't something that comes natural or easy? What does come natural or easy is sitting with my own emotions and my own feelings around the situation, and then saying, okay, this person is who, now they've just showed me who they are, and now that's what I can trust, that they're gonna continue that kind of behavior.
I love what you're saying, because I hear this over and over and over again, and I'm deeply appreciating your vulnerability, because being with your feelings is important, and that's what you have personal control over. I've got a couple of tools that we use a lot at Project Forgive that, everything we do on Project Forgive is free, so you can get these downloads, you can see the free broadcast on Facebook Live. One of them is a meditation on forgiving yourself for not being forgiving. Because I mean, it's like,
sorry to laugh.
Like, like that one person, you just look at him and you want to say, oh my gosh, shoot me in the head, he's a jerk. And you're trying to deal with them and be more evolved and more spiritual. And you just look at him and you get a rush up your body and you just want to go, oh my gosh, get me away from this jerk. And one of the tools that we use is forgiving yourself for not forgiving. Like, okay, I really want to forgive this guy, but he's such a jerk. I'm just going to simply practice forgiving myself for not being forgiving. And we have a meditation on it. And then we got another one. And this one is my absolute hands down favorite tool. And it's called Accepting the Apology You'll Never Receive. And this actually alludes to what you were saying, because we only have control over ourselves. That's all we have control over. And I've got a great analogy of my neighbor. Can I give you this analogy that'll explain accepting the apology you'll never receive? Great, thanks. So this neighbor, he's one of those people, as soon as I see him, I'm immediately annoyed, like immediate, like, oh, here he comes, okay? And he lives right next door to me. And to give you an example, like I'll go out to get the mail and he'll be like, good morning, Shawne. And I could already feel it going up my body, you know, like the annoyance. And I'll say, yeah, but Bob, you know, it's 6 p.m. And he'll say, I know, but you look like you just got up. Like, I kid you not. These are the things he literally says to me. Now, my teachings as a trainer and as a leader, we're always responsible for what we're broadcasting. We're always giving off some kind of signal or a vibration. And we're in charge of that signal or that vibration. And most people that meet would say, oh my gosh, you have great energy. You're so fun, blah, blah, blah. And if you were to ask my neighbor, he'd say, that woman is a little intense. She's probably, you know, got a lot of anger going on over there. That would be his experience of me. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. So accepting the apology you'll never receive is something I can do in my head that Bob will never do. So as soon as I see Bob, what I've been practicing is pretending that he's apologizing to me, and he's not apologizing. He just doesn't have those skills. And what he'd be saying to me, if he could apologize, he'd say, oh, I am so sorry. As soon as I get in a social situation, I am so awkward. I say the dumbest things. You know my background. You know that I'm hurting. And the truth is, I just really, really, really want you to love me. And sometimes the exact opposite comes out of my mouth. And will you just forgive? And you can even feel my compassion and my softness. My being shifts on a dime. And who I'm being with this neighbor now is exquisite and loving and compassionate. And I can give up that annoyance on a dime because I'm becoming so masterful at accepting the apology I'll never receive. And I use this neighbor as an example because that's an easy one. You know, some of us got stuff like, especially for the holidays, we're going to be around in-laws and they've got opposite political views. We've got all kinds of upset around racial divide and inequality and, oh gosh, all kinds of things going on that are much bigger than a neighbor saying you don't look that great in the morning. And I love to use that example because it can be applied universally to anything that you're facing, so you can shift you, so you can have peace in the moment.
What a powerful tool that you've given us, that what a different way to look at your neighbor and how we all can look at people differently. And one thing that, you know, that I've found helpful is to give myself plenty of time and space to be with what is, before I jump to forgiveness. And, you know, I'm not saying this is right, but this is like, for someone who forgiveness doesn't come naturally to, this is what I've found to cope is like, I've been immersed in communities that they're like spirituality is the basis, and you need to, like love is the most important thing, and you need to arrive to a love as quickly as you can. And for me, I don't always get there. I don't always get there right away. So I'll give myself time if there's something that's happened between me and someone else where I feel wronged or hurt or something like that. It's like, okay, this may take 2 or 3 or 4 years for me to fully let go of the pain around the situation. And I know that may sound crazy because it's so much time, but for me, it's like allowing myself spaciousness I need. What do you think about that?
I think it's beautiful. I think every single person has their own unique way that they find internal peace. And if it works for you, rock and freaking roll, like seriously, because it is it's like a fingerprint. Forgiveness is like a fingerprint. It's what works for you. And there's so many myths about forgiveness, even anger. Like anger to me is so precious. We have such mixed emotions as a culture around anger, and we see it as something negative. I see anger as something beautiful and positive, used appropriately, not violence. Usually we equate anger with violence. Anger is one of the most important processes and parts and phases of forgiveness, and honoring it, because your body, your intuition, your soul, when you're angry, is telling you that something's off. And that's so important to listen to and experience. Does that mean you get to like shout at somebody and yell at them and scream your anger? Of course not. We just culturally haven't become skilled at expressing appropriate anger. And we're seeing it right now in politics. And I'm a media trainer by trade, and I work with both sides of a partisanship. And my job as a marriage counselor is to bring people together. And we're at this very ugly, angry stage where we have inappropriate anger, when actually this is going to resolve itself in a really beautiful way. I'm excited to see how this will evolve. And it's getting us more, what's the word I want to use? Getting us more familiar with being able to express anger, because I'm noticing anger is shifting around all these political conversations and strife globally, so that we can find some resolutions. So anger in my world is really, really important.
I'd love to dive into that a little bit with you, because we have such a habit as humans to label. There's these emotions. We polarize a lot. These emotions, anger, upset, frustration, that's over here, and that's not good. You shouldn't be feeling that, right? And as Kama kind of alluded to a little bit, is especially in the spiritual world, we're encouraged oftentimes to feel love, to and a lot of the like kind of manifest and attraction kind of teachings. It's like, if you're feeling that, you're not going to attract what you want fast enough, and you're not tuned in properly, and you need to tune yourself in. And then we had an interesting conversation with Marianne Williamson, where she kind of offered completely different spectrum, is like, well, maybe you should tune into those feelings, and maybe those feelings are really good, and maybe that's such an important part of your healing. And she wrote a whole book on that, where being able to allow those feelings is actually part of the triumph process, part of the process of getting to where you're supposed to get to, or where you want to get to. Maybe you need to go through some of these things, that feelings and emotions and thoughts that we're told are not okay. And as somebody who's worked with a lot of couples like you, Dr. Shawne, I've seen that when people can really bring and even welcome those feelings up, that there's this kind of natural process where people kind of fall into happiness. It's like somebody will tell me this horror story, and then after that they're laughing and smiling, and even though there's tears still falling, there's this joy that is now being expressed. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit with you. Like, you celebrate anger, and you say, let's welcome it up. And this process that we're going through currently, with a lot of polarized in the political system and economy right now, there's this we have a country that feels very divided on many levels. And you're looking at that and going, oh, good, there's a conversation happening now, and we're seeing this discomfort and seeing this frustration. Tell me a little bit about that, and how that works on an individual and bigger level too.
Beautiful. I just have to say, I really like you guys. You guys are so exquisite. It feels so good to have this conversation. This is why, in the forgiveness process, why anger is so important. Because every single time, I've seen it, I've interviewed a lot of people, we're doing a documentary, I've talked to a lot of researchers, I've talked to a lot of experts. Underneath anger is grief. And the access to grief is through your anger. And many times, if you don't feel this anger, you don't get to the heart of it, the heart of grieving. And grief is sacred. Grief is what transmutes us, transforms us. And, it's funny, we got this documentary launching in 2017, and we did all kinds of interviews. And we interviewed 24 4-year-olds, and we asked them about forgiveness, okay? And they were adorable. What is forgiveness? It's a bunch of sorries. It's when you don't hate anyone anymore. It was just precious. And, I had this just feeling, and I said, well, what about anger? So I asked every single one of those 4-year-olds what they thought about anger. And every single one of them said anger was bad. Every single one of them. Now, I'll bet you $1 million their parents are not saying, don't be angry. Angry is evil. they are doing it unconsciously, and our game is to make the unconscious conscious. And it's to have conversations like this, because underneath that anger is when you find that grief. And another example of anger that I love to use outside of the political arena is Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Those moms got really mad. That organization got really mad for a good 10 years. And it took many decades to actually make drinking and driving illegal. I mean, it was a fight. And these mothers were mad enough and inspired enough to work through that so actual change can take place. And when we find that we're angry, whether it's angry about politics or angry about our personal life, when we get present to the anger and then finally let the grief bubble up, that's when we can actually make physical changes. Sometimes it's about setting boundaries. Sometimes in political arenas might be getting involved as an activist in some way. You can see what's going on in Standing Rock right now. People are just really getting really involved by that because they're inspired by what's going on over there and they want to make a difference. For me, in Shawne's world, the politics are merely a reflection of what's been going on culturally and internally for decades. And it's just manifested in our politics. And I can just see for me what this fight means for me internally as an incest survivor. I can see themes everywhere. And as I start dealing with my own pain that's unresolved, I'm getting more and more peace about the politics, and actually solutions are coming forward for me as how I can participate to make a difference. And I am seeing that happening so many places in social media. Are there a lot of folks that are staying in the anger and staying in the combativeness? Yeah, a lot of folks stay there. And those aren't the folks I hang with. I'm sure the folks even listening to this podcast actually take accountability and responsibility for what's going on internally to be able to manifest a powerful way. And that is really why I say this is such an exciting time, even though it's painful, because exciting times also include pain and include fear. It's always that dance between love and fear. And not that either one is good or bad, because I come from a paradigm that fear is actually good, because it's showing you where you need some progress and where you might need to amplify some love spaces or actually take some risks and feel some anger and do some grief work.
I absolutely love this, and such a beautiful conversation we're having. And I'm really wanting to know if, before we close out today, is there any last thing that you want the Thriving Launchers to walk away with?
Yeah, and it's going to sound like a cliche, and we all have our own inner power. However we deal with things is up to us, and we can either be in that fear space where we're annoyed and angry all the time, just with the little things that upset us, or we can come from that compassionate, loving place. And I love to come from the compassionate, loving place authentically by doing the masterful techniques internally so I can shift myself on a dime. And I do believe it becomes a mastery. And that, just like Mother Teresa says, forgiveness is a continuous attitude, a continuous act. Martin Luther King talked about that as well for many, many years. And to me, embodying and practicing a mastery of accepting the apology you'll never receive, or forgiving myself for not forgiving, actually illumines me in those ways so I can be the best, most profound person that I can be. And my wish and my hope is for those that are listening that they also have the courage for that kind of mastery.
So beautiful. We've been here with Dr. Shawne. You're listening to the Thriving Launch podcast. We've been talking about forgiveness. Keep thriving, everyone, and find your own form of forgiveness.